What's a fun NSFW history fact? Operation Midnight Climax was an operation carried out by the CIA as a subproject of Project MKUltra, the mind control research program that began in the 1950s. Operation Midnight Climax started in 1954 and consisted of a web of CIA-run, safe houses in San Francisco. It was established in order to study the effects of LSD on non-consenting individuals. Prostitutes on the CIA payroll were instructed to lure clients back to the safe houses, where they were surreptitiously plied with a wide range of substances, including LSD, and monitored behind one-way glass. The prostitutes were instructed in the use of post-coital questioning to investigate whether the victims could be convinced to involuntarily reveal secrets. The victims were sometimes fed subliminal messages in attempts to induce them to involuntary actions, including criminal activities such as robbery, assault, and assassination. Many of the CIA operatives involved in the experiments voluntarily indulged in the drugs and prostitutes for recreational purposes as well. Vikings were indeed banging up and down the British coastline like pop culture portrays them. But unlike pop culture imagery of them grabbing women out of their houses and carrying them off to our word, we have writings from the period of British men complaining about Vikings seducing British women using their unfair advantage of regular bathing and grooming. The last main-line descendant of the Medici family, John Gaston de' Medici, spent most of the last years of his reign laying in bed being entertained by a group of handsome young men rounded up from the streets of Florence, who performed various sexual acts in his bedroom for his entertainment. He spent so much time in his gay harem that people rumored he had died since he never appeared in public. Eventually, he did show up in public to dismiss rumors of his death. He showed up so drunk he could barely speak, threw up twice, and then had to be physically carried back to his bedchamber. Canadian soldiers had the highest rates of STDs among Allied troops in both World War I and World War II. There's a sound archive of JFK having sex, because the FBI thought the girl was a German spy and tried recording the conversation. Well, no conversation took place, but a lot of effing did. Warren G. Harding wrote naughty love letters to his mistress in which he refers to his deed by the name Jerry. Much conspiracy has been made about J.P. Morgan choosing not to sail on Titanic at the last minute. But the reality was it was his birthday week and he was having way too much fun with his French mistress. He skipped Titanic because the sex was too good and he wanted to stay. A quick extra fun fact. Although Morgan died in 1913, the financial fallout from the Titanic disaster hit IMM so badly it was a massive factor in contributing to them seeking bankruptcy protection in 1915. This was astounding, coming from the company that had bailed out the entire US government in 1907. So, Morgan skipping Titanic got him screwed in more ways than one. King Philip V of Spain, 1683 to 1746, and his court liked to play a game called El Improvido, the Imperturbable. Basically, a bunch of men bottom naked were sitting around a table, which was covered by a cloth. A lady was under the table and sucked one of the men's cock. The rest of the players should guess who was being sucked. If their guess was correct, the other player had to leave the game. If it was wrong, he would leave. The game was won by the player who would come in the lady's mouth without the rest of the players noticing. Apparently, the game was very popular among the French nobility in 18th century. King Charles II had a wig made out of the pubic hair of his mistresses. King George IV attempted to recreate one of his own, but died before he could complete it. KGB once planned to blackmail the first Indonesian president, Sukarno, by sending him Russian women disguised as flight attendants. Sukarno, infamous for his womanizer behavior, then had sex with them while KGB secretly recorded the affairs. KGB later showed him the sex tapes and to their surprise, Sukarno was instead thrilled and even asked for more copies to show to his people back in the country. The plan ultimately failed. Cock rings were commonly used in Jin and Song-era China around 1200 and were made from the eyelids of goats. The goat's eyelashes were usually left on to add an extra bit of stimulation for the humans involved. What's even stranger is that you can still buy natural goat eye cock rings online today. How's this? Ancient Egyptians believed that the god of creation birthed the world by masturbating and viewed it as a magical act. The first Spain-filmed and produced corn movies were commissioned by none other than its king, Alfonso XIII, around the 1920s. He hired the Count of Romanones, a very important political figure at the time. For example, he was the Senate chairman during those years, to hire movie directors and manage their development. He also gave input on the scripts, involving busy state men, priests, or doctors. Alfonso would hold screenings of those movies in the royal palace. It is widely known his infidelities to his wife, Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg, and the list of out-of-wedlock is long and notorious, so I guess that would be business as usual. Julius Caesar had sex with many women, including the mothers, sisters, and wives of anyone who insulted him. And while he was on trial for his involvement in the Catalan conspiracy, he got a letter. Cato saw this and wanted to know what it was, but Caesar refused. Cato insisted, and so Caesar read. It was a letter from Cato's sister about all the things she wanted him to do to her. Chevalier d'Eon was a French diplomat and spy in England and Russia. Once he retired, he revealed to the public that he had been a woman the entire time. She was henceforth made to wear gender-appropriate clothing for the rest of her life. She went on to write some books and support the American Revolution. But here's the kicker. When she died, they found out she was actually a man the whole time. He was double cross-dressing. Don't know if this counts as a history fact, but James Joyce's love letters to his girlfriend, in which he passionately writes about her various farts, are quite funny. Erfurt latrine disaster. In July 1184, Henry VI, King of Germany who later became the Holy Roman Emperor, held court at a Hoftag in the Petersburg Citadel in Erfurt. On the morning of July 26th, the combined weight of the assembled nobles caused the wooden second-story floor of the building to collapse, and most of them fell through into the latrine cesspit below the ground floor in liquid excrement. This event is called Erfurter Latrinensters in several German sources. The ancient Greeks believed small PPs were a sign of intelligence and cultural distinction, and only foolish men who were ruled by lust and sexual urges had large PPs. That's why so many statues have tiny ones. In medieval times, when a boy and a girl in the country of some parts of Europe wanted to get married, they needed to prove they were worthy. So when the boy had proved he was able to provide for a family, the girl had to prove she was able to provide offspring. So they were allowed then to make love, and when the girl got pregnant, the community made sure the boy actually married the girl. It's where the engagement comes from. During the engagement, the girl would sleep in a little room above the milk storage with a ladder against the window, so the boy was able to climb up against the ladder to make love to the girl. This was all supposed to happen all out in the open because the community had the right to know. Other boys, if they were from the same church, were also allowed to climb upstairs and fool around with the girl so she could say goodbye to her youth, but they were supposed to stay above the blankets. This was also so the girl would prove she would not go all the way and stay faithful to her fiancé. This was called cuisson. We still have a children's song about this. It talks about this and warns what would happen if a girl would get pregnant from another boy. The child would be brought to the nuns. Ancient Greeks and Romans used a herb called silphium as contraceptive, so much in fact that the plant was extinct by 200 BC. Modern heart symbol comes from the shape of leaves of the plant. Samuel Pepys, Chief Secretary of the Admiralty under James II, who was responsible for much of the early modernization of the Royal Navy Admiralty, was a notorious adulterer. He kept a diary which detailed not just his work in the Admiralty and life in 17th century London, but also all his escapades. Also, apparently, the Congress of Vienna, end of Napoleonic Wars, had a lot of debauchery going on that the cloistered historians don't like to talk about. I don't remember those details as well though. Pretty much the entire Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt. When the Ptolemies came to power in Hellenistic Egypt, they took up the trappings of the pharaohs. That included marrying and having children with their sisters. The one thing they neglected to take up was the tradition of Pharaoh taking on secondary wives and mistresses. So that if the Pharaoh failed to produce a healthy heir with his wife, he could just present one of his children with his other wives as his heir. Which was frequently a problem, given the massive amount of incest going on. Without this failsafe in place to inject fresh DNA into the bloodline every few generations, things went downhill quickly for the Ptolemies. By the end of the line, they were almost exclusively a bunch of blithering idiots interested pretty much only in partying at their court. Whenever they could be dragged into making a political decision, it was usually disastrous and heavily damaged Egypt domestically and on the foreign scene. The peak of this was during the reign of Ptolemy X. He married his brother's widow, Cleopatra Selene, and had a son with her, Ptolemy XI. Then, he divorced her, married her daughter, his niece Berenice III, and had Cleopatra V with her. Cleopatra V would go on to marry and have children with Ptolemy X's nephew Ptolemy XII. And Ptolemy XI would end up marrying Berenice III. And yet somehow, this literal cluster EF of a family managed to produce Cleopatra VII. The Cleopatra, who managed to go toe-to-toe with Julius Caesar politically. America's first African-American pageant queen, Vanessa L. Williams, had her crown stripped from her due to the Corn magazine, Penthouse reissuing some illicit photos she took years prior, just to capitalize on her win. She was able to professionally recover and become a famous actress and singer, releasing a hit album right after the scandal and having a worldwide hit with Save the Best for Last in 1992, and having famous film and TV roles such as Dr. Lee Cullen in Arnold Schwarzenegger in Eraser and Wilhelmina Slater in Ugly Betty. In a brilliant case of laser-guided karma, Penthouse would have to destroy the issue they put out, which cost Williams her win because the centerfold was Tracy Lords, whose near entire body of work on adult film and photography would be banned when to emerge she used a fake ID to get into the industry when she was still a minor. During World War II, British condom manufacturers were contracted to provide the contraceptives to the military, particularly for use to cover rifle barrels during amphibious landings. Manufacturers were also asked about making condoms large enough to cover mortar tubes for the same purpose. Churchill approved looking into it, reportedly suggesting, and I paraphrase, "We should call them British size so that if the Germans capture any of them, they will know who the real master race is." Historians believe that Hitler only had one testicle due to a medical condition. After his arrest following the Beer Hall Putsch, a failed rebellion in 1923, a medical exam showed that he suffered from right-side cryptorchidism, meaning his right ball sack was basically deflated. Hitler had another doctor say he was healthy and strong in the 1930s, which covered up his testicle issue. Hitler's 1923 records resurfaced at an auction back in 2010. Grigory Rasputin was a mystic during Tsar Nicholas II's reign. He was known for curing a woman's sin of lechery by taking them to a bathhouse, stripping naked, beating the woman with a belt, having sex with her, and leaving without once entering a bath. He was eventually found to be a dangerous individual, so a plot was made to assassinate him. He was invited around someone's house to help cure the man's wife, and fed little cakes and wine laced with cyanide. After that failed to kill him, the man, can't remember his name, got his pistol and shot him point blank, went upstairs to get his co-conspirators to help remove the body. They found Rasputin had crawled out of the house and up the driveway. All the men shot him several times, then dumped Rasputin's body in the St. Petersburg River. His body was found days later with water in the lungs and his arms upwards as if trying to escape the frozen river. He also has his PP preserved and on display in a Siberian museum. Edit, apparently that wasn't his actual cock, and I'm not Googling Rasputin's PP. A chilling man to look up. Hitler farted too much, so his doctor prescribed him meth. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Also check out our other videos and have an amazing day.